back to the Practical Performance Podcast, brought to you very proudly by VALÄRE. So we are today going to chat about stretching versus strengthening and its efficacy to help minimise particularly running-related injuries. But talking of running and training and stretching or strengthening, how is everybody's training going? Joe, how are you going in the UK? Is it getting a little bit more chilly over there?
It is getting a little bit more chilly, definitely compared to you guys in the Seychelles, but it's still nice and warm for this time of year. 16 degrees Celsius, so we've got to make the most of it. Which is enough, but at the end of October is actually pretty good. Like, that's as good as it gets out here. But no, training's going well.
I'm calling BS. I was in the UK just a week ago in South Wales, and we had a few 10-degree days. So if you've got 16, you've got it really good.
Yeah, 16 is the temperature in Norwich this week isn't supposed to drop below 15 during the day.
Happy day.
So you go to the wettest part, mate, Swansea. You probably get like a bit stuck there. It's like probably rains like 50% of the time over there.
Oh, do you know what? I'm very pro Wales, but yeah, it's a wet part of the world. But South Wales is a place close to my heart. But it's always good over there.
Yeah. I reckon if it was raining, so if Joe went for a run and it was raining and we went for a run and it wasn't raining, would come back equally as wet. Ours is just sweat and Joe's is rain, because I come back from every run like it's been raining. But I know the heat is really good for adaptation, so I just tell myself that every time I go for a run. I'm like, Kate, it's doing you good. Think of your marathon, just keep going.
Yeah. Joe, what are you focusing on anything this off season, or is it a pretty balanced swim, bike, run program for you at the moment?
Yeah, pretty balanced. Just a gradual build, really. Looking at what I did like in 2021 to 2022 when it worked really well, and I managed to have a really good winter's training and started quite early. But then that gave me the ability to like just gradually build it up and not force it. So to be honest, I've just been gradually building it, and I'm doing that approach. So I don't ever feel like I'm like overdoing it and that I really need a rest. But then I can keep increasing it over time. And then by the time we get to like March, I should be doing quite a lot of volume, some really good big sessions, but not really fatiguing myself any more than what I am at the moment. But saying that, at the moment, I'm actually on an easy week. I thought I'd do 3 weeks of training and then knock it down for 1 week just to have a little bit of a recovery period and get the adaptations. And then I'll go into 3 weeks of more training again, and I'll look to build on what I did the previous 3 weeks. But it all seems like it's going really well. Like the numbers are getting better and the sessions are getting a bit bigger over time. So just trying not to force it really, and hopefully by the time Ironman New Zealand rolls around, I'll be in really good form.
Nice. Do you ever, in these peaks, Joe, like you seem like a really resilient athlete. Like for as long as we've known you, you either don't get injured or you don't tell me about them. So do you ever get injuries, like especially running?
Well, touch wood, not that often. Like I think the last time I had a running injury where I had to have like an extended period of time from not doing anything was probably 2019, I reckon. I can't remember if that was like the problem I had in the hip, or maybe 2021. I'm not sure really. Yeah, there was 1 year when I did the 12-hour time trial on the bike because I couldn't run. That was the first time I did it, and I think that was 2019. And then I did it in 2020 just because there was no other events on. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, normally when I feel like there's an injury coming, I'll be really cautious and like not push it. Whereas I think some people try and ignore it and run for as long as they can, don't they? And then by that point it gets worse. And then once it finally goes, it goes. But yeah, I mean, how's your training going? You two, you're training for the marathon, aren't you? You're knocking in some good sessions.
Yeah, we're going really well, I think. Well, I don't know. I think so. Like I was saying, it's so hard here in the heat because you just kind of can't get a gauge of that pace, but we've been pretty consistent. And
yeah, you've been going very well.
Yeah, pretty good. Yes. I only ever just get like tightness through my calves because I'm such a 4-foot runner. And
really?
Right, yeah, like you could chop the heel of my shoes off and it wouldn't make a difference. Like I'm so naturally 4-foot. I don't think about it. I just run really 4-foot, and it just takes a toll on my calves. So I'm just always strength training my calves.
Get on the track for the 1500.
I know. I used to always be good on the track. Like I was that person that would never train in high school and then just rock up to the high school athletics and do all right. And I was that real annoying person. I'm like, damn, I should have kept on that.
What was the biggest marathon session that you two did in the last like 10 days, or like biggest run session?
Oh, yours.
For me personally, I did one when I was in the UK just the other week. I just focused mostly on getting some volume over that period of time, and for that 7 days, I actually hit my biggest 7 day rolling run volume. I think I got 180 k's. That's about 110 miles. Mostly just kind of easy, steady k's, but I did get one marathon specific session in there. Very, very simple. I just ran 21.1 kilometers at about a marathon kind of intensity. So it doesn't get any more simple than that.
So what did you hit, and how did that compare then to being in the heat? Because obviously you've been in Seychelles for a while then. So how much quicker were you?
You were disappointed.
Yeah. Look, it was interesting. Like I said, it's really hard for us to gauge in these kind of conditions where it's so hot and humid how that would translate to the cooler conditions. I averaged 3:30 per k. Joe, you can probably tell me roughly what that is in mile pace. I'm not sure.
It's 2:27 marathon pace, isn't it? It's about 5:39, 5:40, some around that kind of mile pace, something like that.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, I kind of maybe hoped I'd be kind of 3, 4, maybe 5 seconds a k quicker than that, but it wasn't too bad still. But look, in terms of effort level, significantly easier, obviously, than comparing it to doing it here in Seychelles. And in terms of how much quicker per k for the same effort, look, I would be pretty confident in saying at least 15 seconds per k difference that I'd have seen. Which is obviously massive, isn't it? I mean, can you imagine, how long it would take to kind of get those kind of improvements? And that's just what I saw, I reckon, from the weather conditions alone.
I think just a quick one on that. So I know we're going to talk about other stuff, and we can talk about this more in the heat one. But maybe one of the reasons why you might have been a bit disappointed might have been aerobically it feels so much easier because you're not having to cool yourself down. But maybe the reason why you're a bit disappointed could be because you're not getting the muscular load in the Seychelles, because it's harder to run suspended periods of a lot of time at faster paces because of the heat. So your muscles aren't getting the load, are they? So when you come down to like Wales or like, where it's cooler, aerobically it doesn't feel that hard, but running at those paces maybe you're loading you and then you're struggling a bit. So it could actually pay off to potentially do some training on the treadmill where you can do some faster running just to get the muscles used to that load. Potentially, I think, because it's like training at altitude, isn't it? When I go there, we normally shorten the reps to make it so you can run or ride at high power outputs, because it's harder, obviously, with the lack of oxygen. And although you get the aerobic benefits from being at altitude, and that's probably the same with you guys being in the Seychelles, your muscles don't get the same load. So I find that when you come down to sea level, you can actually struggle with the high power outputs for the first 4 to 6 weeks. And then after 6 weeks, there's like a sweet spot where you still got all the gains from being at altitude. But then because you've been able to train at higher intensities, that's when you're like at your best. But for you guys, it could actually pay off to do some sessions on a treadmill where you can run faster in an air-conned place to really get the muscles used to that load. And then I think that you would get a big boost of fitness, especially when you come down to racing in cooler conditions.
I'm going to give Joe the nerd hat now because I really liked that. I think that was good. I'm taking it off. I'm giving it to Joe. This is where it's good, though, the science and the practicality, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you're spot on, Joe. You're right. It's even if the effort's equivalent or the effort's the same, if you're seeing that bigger difference in pace, then, like you said, you're not actually kind of loading the body in the same way under the same intensity and at the same paces. So it is very different. I suppose for me personally, I've probably got a bit of almost like a gap in my training where I'm not spending here in Seychelles much time training in and around that 3:30k pace. For me, that marathon effort, like I said, it's probably more like 3:45. And then if I'm doing faster threshold stuff, I'm trying to get down to kind of like 3:15k pace. And so I've got a bit of a window around that 3:30 where I'm not doing much running. So like I said, maybe that is why I found it a little bit harder than what I maybe hoped.
And it's also hard, like,
I was just going to say, you might find that your legs get battered when you do the marathon racing at 3:30k pace because 3:45k pace isn't loading your muscles up quite so much. So in the marathon, you might find that once you got 25k in at the end, you'd be like, I don't know why, but my legs just felt so sore at 25k. And you'd probably be like, I wasn't breathing that hard, so I don't understand what happened. And that would probably be why, because, you at 3:45k pace, you'd be fine. 3:30K pace, you're breathing fine. It feels like you're pacing okay, but your legs would probably just get battered, and then last 10K. That's what really slows you down, isn't it, in the marathon? It's not necessarily the fact that you're breathing hard. It's just the fact that your hips get tight, your legs, your quads feel like they're flipping rocks, and you just can't run quick. And you're like, what's happening to me? Why am I slowing down so much? Because I don't feel like I'm working that hard, but my legs are just so sore.
Yeah.
That's it. Exactly right. I mean, touch wood amongst all that. Touch wood. But my body's hanging in there. I'm trying to stay strong, stay resilient, which is obviously the topic of today's chat.
Pretty lucky he lives with me. No, I'm kidding.
Just quickly before we go on, what was the biggest session then that you did, like marathon specific one or anything? Yeah.
I did 4 times 4K at marathon pace, which mine was actually arguably compared to Nick's a little bit more on predicted hopeful marathon pace, and that was really good. That was a good confidence booster one for me. So it was a total, I think I did it's like a 26K session, and it was 4 4Ks at marathon effort, but that felt good. That felt really good. I struggled more with, actually my body felt really good. I felt more struggled with like trying to get the nutrition, the hydration in, because here I say to Nick all the time, I don't think I'm a smelly sweater, but I'm like a heavy sweater. Like and I like a salty one as well, especially since having the boys. My thermoregulation has just gone in the absolute crapper. Like I cannot.
It's definitely better to be a heavy sweater than a smelly sweater. Like a smelly sweater would be horrendous, wouldn't it? Living that.
Oh my God, I sweat so much, I must smell, but I don't know. Someone's going to see me at a race and be like, Kate, girl, you are smelly. I don't know, but
I was looking for you, Kate, at the start of the race. I couldn't see you, but I could smell something, but I didn't know where you were.
I started, he's just like, where is she? I don't know how the conversation turned into this. But anyway, so I'm trying to like make sure I get in enough electrolytes and nutrition, but then I'm worried I'm going to do that too much, right? And then come race day, I'm going to do like a Christian, end up taking on too much, and then it not match up with the environment. So that's what I'm trying to play around with a little bit here. And also doing those big sessions, then, looking after 2 little kitties and not being too dehydrated or shattered. It's a balance, but it's good.
What paces did you hit for the 4Ks, and what was the recovery then?
I averaged, I think they were between
about 4:30 to 4:40. Was it?
Yeah, they were 4:30 to 4:35-ish minutes per K for those, and to run a sub 3:10 is 4:30 average that I would have to do.
Your target sub 3:10 then for the marathon? Does that get you into London? That
would get me into London. So that's the A goal. Yeah, but then B goal 3:13's New York. C goal is 3:25 would be Boston or Chicago.
C goals, I'll go back to an Ironman.
C goal is just like, hey, go back to triathlon. It's so that's where I'm at. But also just staying on top of injuries, which is what I really wanted to chat to you guys about. So I want to go over this study that was published actually only in May this year. So it's a very new study. This was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. Okay, so that is, for anyone that knows research, that's kind of like your pinnacle of your sports medicine journal. So if something gets published in there, it's very reputable. So you can, know that it's been thoroughly peer reviewed and it's a good quality study. So it is titled, if anybody wants to look this up, it is titled Hip and Core Exercise Program Prevents Running-Related Overuse Injuries in Adult Novice Recreational Runners, a 3-arm randomised controlled trial. Now, that title pretty much gives away the findings, which is what I wanted to go through. But I'm still going to talk you guys through it, and then Nick and Joe, you guys are going to join in the convo, and we can make this really practical for all of our listeners of what they can take out of this study and apply it. So this study had 245 female athletes and 80 male athletes, which first of all, I found really cool because the majority of sports science is in males. So it's really nice to have a combo of males and females, and more females for a change, which was quite nice. They were novice runners. So these were not, running like big Ks, training up for a marathon. They were novice runners. I think they had to have 2 years of experience to be included in this study. And they separated these runners, and there was a total, so what's that total? Like 315 runners. So this is a huge sample size, and this study was run over 2 years, which is massive. Like, this is a huge study that this group of researchers did, which is just phenomenal if you're thinking about the logistics of research. So they were randomized into one of three groups, and these three groups were the following. So they were either randomized into a hip and core strengthening group, a foot and ankle strengthening group, or a static stretching group. And they were...
Fine.
Yes, I know. Joe's like, hang on, is this study closed? I've got to go on my static stretching one. No, Joe. No.
Please tell me the static stretching helps. Please tell me that.
The stretching, I'm going to tell you, okay? You crack me up. Okay, so this the intervention went for 6 months. So it was a 24-week intervention. And in these groups, the runners were matched in terms of their running training. So what that means is that in those groups, they were given a running program. Some of them went to group sessions. They were given the program, so they all had exactly the same running training. So that couldn't then influence the results. And then they completed either their hip and core, their foot and ankle, or their stretching, Joe's group, on top of that. They were advised to do these programs anywhere between 2 to 4 times a week, but 2 of these sessions were supervised sessions that were run by qualified physios that they did in person twice a week, and then they were given the program on an app that they could do then at home, an optional extra 2 times as well. On average, I think that each of the groups completed their extra session. It was on average 3 times a week, I believe. So their running-related injuries were tracked over this time using an app. So the athletes would then report any time that they had an injury, and an injury included things like an ache, a pain, stiffness, any form of, and it was generally lower extremity injuries. It included overuse and acute injuries. And any time one of these athletes reported an injury, a physio gave them a call and went through the whole history of that injury to make sure it was documented properly. So all groups did this over 6 months, doing their strength training, whether it's hip or core or foot or stretching. Their injuries were reported over this time, and then at the end, the data analysis was run to see if any of these groups made a difference to running-related injuries. Because there have been some studies that have looked at some form of strength interventions to minimize running-related injuries, but to be honest, it's such a hard thing to run as a researcher, and the studies that have done this involved really light body weight exercises, and they were just sort of prescribed online, and people weren't tracked to see if they were actually adhering to the interventions or not. So I'm going to share with you some of the results. So before I do that, any questions about the study so far from either of you?
No, not just yet. I don't
think.
think.
Explained it pretty all right?
I'm just crossing my fingers that I haven't wasted 26 years of time static stretching.
Oh my goodness, Joe needed this study to be published ages ago.
I'm just praying that the static stretching group surpassed everyone's expectations. Come on,
you
guys.
Haven't been in way, Joe, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, do you know what? For Joe, it's obviously worked. Okay, look, we'll just go with it. Okay, and I'm going to read these results straight from the study because I don't want myself to misinterpret anything. Okay, so the discussion, the big part of their discussion says, the most important finding of our study was a 39% lower prevalence of all injuries and a 52% lower prevalence of substantial overuse injuries in novice runners performing the hip and core focus program compared to the group performing static stretching before running. During the 24-week study, the prevalence of all substantial overuse injuries in the hip and core group was nearly every week lower than that in the static stretching group. Our findings are novel and highlight the ability of hip and core strengthening exercises to prevent running-related injuries. So a couple more little stats. So the injury reduction in the hip and core group was 34% lower incidence of all lower limb injuries compared to the static stretching group. 39% lower prevalence of injuries and 52% lower prevalence of substantial injuries. So substantial injuries, they counted as anything that required, I think it was more than 7 days of altered running. So that's what they classified as substantial.
Okay, with these groups, what running training were they doing then? Were they all on the same running training plans? They had to run the same amount of miles and stuff like that, or like sessions and stuff every week?
They were all on the same running program. So it's actually got a really nice little segment on it in there. So all 3 study groups follow the same running program planned by an experienced endurance coach and exercise physiologist. It included 2 organised training sessions per week and 1 to 2 voluntary independently conducted sessions per week. They tracked all of their running over that time, and they found no significant difference between groups in terms of their running volume, duration or intensity. So it was
obviously
all...
It would be really skewed, wouldn't it, if one group randomly had a few people, or like a decent amount of people that were like running double the volume of another group, wouldn't it? Because then you'd be like, oh well, did it actually work, or were they injured because their volume was like twice as high, or they were doing harder sessions? They were doing 2 or 3 interval sessions a week instead of like 1 or 2. Did they have to run it like set paces as well? Because like, how did they monitor like that they weren't doing their like easy runs too hard, because that would obviously impact injuries?
That's a really good question. And Joe, I feel like you're kind of clutching at straws here for your static stretching group to get over the line. But okay, so during the intervention, here we go. Oh, they also had technique sessions and running drill sessions run by the same person for all groups. So then that tried to eliminate running technique being a factor when it came to injury. Well, and all of the sessions were actually prescribed by how the session should feel. So it wasn't prescribed pace because everyone was different. So they would give them like an RPE chart, and they were instructed to modify the session based on their feel. So it was all by RPE. So then each of the athletes at different levels could accommodate for that. They were given advice on running techniques. So things such as running with a little bit more of an upright posture, length of stride, and the use of their arms. But there were no recommendations on heel strike type or whether it was heel strike, midfoot or forefoot. And they were given no recommendations on footwear either. Okay, so they were the 2 things that they just let the runners do themselves.
Yeah.
So you asked something else as well that I was going to address in that running. No, I can't remember. Interestingly, though, compared to the ankle and foot group, which we've kind of forgotten about, there was no significant difference in injury rates between the static stretching group or the ankle or foot group. But interestingly, the ankle and foot group were 3.6 times more likely to have an injury than the static stretching group.
Why would that be then?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. Thank you for taking the bait on that one. No. Well, it is interesting because there has also been a study that came out, I think it was only 1 or 2 years ago, that did look at foot and ankle exercises on reducing running related injuries, and they actually found a decrease in injury occurrence. But I think that what was the issue with the foot and ankle group in this particular one was the loads of the foot and ankle exercises were not enough. So they were doing things like standing on a Bosu ball, standing on a bit of foam, and then just some banded like ankle inversion, eversion. So that's like putting the sole of your foot in and out, and then dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, so pointing your foot up and down just with a band. So it's quite hard to increase the resistance of that, to be really challenging to get a stimulus. But they also, and this was in all groups, they also gave them their exercise programs to do before runs. So if you were doing those kind of exercises in your foot and ankle just before you go and do a run session, to me that doesn't quite make sense, because you're pre-fatiguing those foot intrinsic muscles. So they might have actually been at the high risk of injury because they were pre-fatiguing them doing these exercises before going for a run. And I think that in novice athletes, which was this group of athletes, that's silly because they're still relatively new to running.
Yeah.
Even the same with the hip and core group, they did it before their runs too. And I'm shocked that it didn't actually maybe have more of an injury risk than what it did. So there were a couple of acute injuries, but no adverse effects from these programs in the hip and core group.
Do you think they probably did that because it would save time, and because they're novice runners and obviously they're going to be working normal jobs, they knew that they could probably guarantee that they could get X amount of runs and sessions done a week? Whereas if they said, oh, don't do it on the same day as you run, it could have really impacted the trial if they like missed strength sessions, like each week, because obviously that's the first thing that goes with everyone, isn't it? If you're training for running, normally with runners, the first thing that will take the miss is the strength and conditioning and stuff like that, isn't it? They're not going to miss the run. So that would have really impacted the trial, wouldn't it, if people were going 2 weeks without doing a session and stuff like that. So they probably thought it's not ideal, but if we get everyone doing it before they run and it's only a 30-minute session, they're probably all going to be able to get it done, and we can kind of keep them, make sure they do it and complete it.
Exactly. And I think you're spot on with that, Joe, because they also supervised 2 of the sessions a week of the actual strength exercises. So I think they tied it in then with a supervised run session as well. So it was purely logistics why they did that. And yeah, so I think that in a real world, you wouldn't do that. And I wonder if in the real world, then your injuries from that foot and ankle group would actually not be that high, because this was the argument between like what's called a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach. So what that means is like the top-down approach is when you strengthen the hip and the core muscles, that's like the top of your lower legs, right? And then it flows on down nicely to have a nice flow and effect on the lower limbs, versus some people argue you do a bottoms-up approach where you work on the foot and ankle stability first and it has a nice flow and effect up. But really those muscles are so much smaller, you still need to work on the global ones first. What was interesting was that in the stretching group, you'll be happy to hear this, Joe. Okay, I'm going to give you the little bit of the silver lining here for your static stretching group. It's not too much of silver lining, but it is a silver lining. And when I read this, I did actually think of you. So it did say in here, now I don't want to get this mixed up here, but where was it? It did say that in the static stretching group, it had, no negative effects. In fact, in the static stretching group, I think they had the lowest number of acute injuries. So what I mean by that is like there is, a bit of controversy around if you static stretch before a run, it could be detrimental to injuries. It could be good for injuries. We don't really know. There's not really enough evidence to support either, but it didn't seem to have a detrimental effect at all on these runners. So, that's good.
The thing what I'd be really miffed at is if you gave up like 2 years of your time and you got like supervised for like 2 sessions a week, so you could have basically like almost like personal training, isn't it? You could have made some real big breakthroughs, and you got like a static stretching group, which like you could have done from home. You don't really need. It didn't really make any difference, and someone else got the hip and core. They made some really big gains, like, and you're like, I've just done 2 years of flipping, doing a calf stretch and like lifting my heel to my ass, like stretching my quad.
I'm hitting my back and bringing my foot in, like, wow, how exciting.
Like 2 years for the trial, and you got, just do a few static stretches in the corner. We're just taking these guys through their core and like hip strengthening thing. We'll be with you. We'll be back with you in 20 minutes.
It was literally like that in my PhD because it was a 6-month intervention. I had to run information seminars, like all sorts of stuff to keep the control group involved, because I was like, because they didn't get the strength training. They just carried on as normal. So I was like trying to do things to keep them interested in it. In the end, I had to say to them, I will give you 4 weeks of free intervention. Just come and I will give you the program I've given the intervention group. I'll give it to you at the end. And that's what I had to do to keep them engaged, because they were like, all these people strength training getting all this like free PT virtually, and I'm just here getting like nothing, giving up time, filling out your weekly shitty survey.
That you could be like to your mates, I can't come out that night. I've signed up to this study. It's 2 years, and they're like, oh really? That sounds interesting. What do you do? Well, not much really. They just tell me to go in the corner and just do a few stretches, and then we go for a run. Like,
to make it a little bit better, it was a 6-month intervention. It was just they had to do 2 lots of it over 2 years. Because this was COVID time. So even in the article, it said they had to like, imagine this, you're stuck in the static stretching group, COVID hits. So now you're not static stretching in a group where you can even talk, you're in the corner, like doing your static stretches, not allowed to be around anybody.
That's 6 months of your life you're never getting back. And they're novice runners. They're not even like elite, are they? They're doing it for the social, and they're getting told to do it in the corner. It's like, all right, they'll be like, that was a really fun study. Do you want to come back and do it again? No.
I have one question, Kate. So you said earlier that the timing is maybe not ideal doing the strength training or static stretching immediately before a run. When would, this may be more of a scheduling question, when would be the ideal timing?
Okay, so I think that this completely depends on the athlete, because say if I was strength training you or Joe, I wouldn't care if you did your strength training before an easy run, like a zone 2 run. If you're going on 5-zone model, that would be fine. In fact, in some ways, I think that doing that before is good, because you'd go into your run a little bit more fatigued. So you'd get used to that feeling, like what we were talking about earlier about wanting to actually feel a bit of that fatigue. So you get ready for like back end of marathon kind of thing, right? Some of that's good if you are an experienced runner. If you're a novice runner, I would definitely do your run first. So really what these guys could have done is just flipped it. I would have just flipped it. In novice runners, I would have run first, given them a little bit of a cool down, done the strength training second. If you're novice, that's definitely what I would do until you feel pretty confident in your running, you've been running for a few years, you don't pull up too sore from your runs anymore, I would definitely do that. Or you could probably flip it like halfway through that intervention if you were used to the exercises. But they did keep progressing the exercises in terms of intensity. And so like they were still challenging throughout. So it was still going to cause that bit of fatigue. But yeah, it depends on experience. Does that answer it?
Yeah, absolutely helps. I was thinking lots of people listening would probably be thinking, okay, well, you've said it's not ideal to do immediately before, so therefore when might be the ideal time to do it?
And it's interesting too, because there is research that says that you should ideally separate sessions by 6 to 9 hours. That's for optimal benefits, but I still think there's some really good benefits that you can get from putting them close together if you're not going to put yourself at injury risk, like what happened in this study, because you will get maybe like, changes in testosterone, growth hormone, like a lot of things that you might get that you actually want to use that from your strength session to increase your endurance session. That has been done in rugby players where they've seen an increase in performance after a strength training session, not been done in runners, but it would be really interesting to see.
How long did they leave it? Kate, just going on about that, what you said about the rugby players, how long did they leave it then when they saw this increase?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'll have to look into it, Joe, but it's a really interesting
without looking into it, do you think it would have probably been about an hour to 2 hours, or would like that kind of close, or would it have been like 30 minutes or something?
No, do you know, I think there was still a few hours. I think it was.
Oh, right, so like maybe 3 or 4 hours, not necessarily 9. They might do that in the morning, and then like after lunch, like 3 or 4 hours later, then they would have done the other training.
Yeah, I think it was around that, but I would have to look into that to double check. But I think there are definitely pros of doing your strength and endurance together if you can handle it. There's obviously cons to it if you can't, because you are going to increase your injury risk, which is what happened in this study. But it also depends on the type of exercise as well. Because people do drills before an interval run and it helps them. So it depends on the type of exercises that you are doing as well. So that's going to play a big role to it. But
and like you said earlier, Joe, you've got practical considerations to make as well. Like you said, if you're working, you've got family commitments, you've got a small window, maybe only one window of the day where you can train, where you're going to have to do your strength and you run on the same day. And especially if you're an athlete who is training, if you want to train, let's say, or running in this case 5-6 times a week, and you also want to get 2, maybe 3 strength sessions in, then on some days you're going to have to double up, aren't you? You can't always have just a single session day.
I do my strength training before a swim, like when I do it, because I tried doing it after the swim and I felt terrible in the gym, like awful. Whereas I found doing it before the swim actually felt I was able to do it much better. And then when I got into the water, it was like my muscles were like activated, even though it was with like heavy weights. I didn't really feel the fatigue. So I felt a lot better swimming and found that I didn't need to do quite as much of a warm up as what I would normally do if I didn't have to, because I felt really good from as soon as I get in the water. But when I did it after the swim, I just felt awful. Like I couldn't do the weights properly. And then I thought my technique's probably going to be a bit more sloppy. And I've actually got more chance of injuring myself with when you're doing like squats and stuff like that and the deadlifts, you don't want to have like bad technique, do you? And like getting to the morning first thing and doing the strength, I just felt I was doing it better. I was able to lift heavier weights, and then I felt better in the water as well. So for me, it worked. It definitely works out doing it before a swim session.
And that makes sense. And that kind of ties in with like this study as well, because this was even in novices. Remember, they were doing that hip and core before their run as well. And there was no increase in incidence of injuries in them. I wonder if it really got those muscle groups fired up and was really good for their running as well. So I would have loved to have had them include not only, says me, thank you to this group of researchers. I hate when people say, they should have included this or that, because this is a huge study. So it's no disrespect, but it would have been incredible to have seen if there were any biomechanical changes like that happened after running, after doing some of those hip and core exercises.
Like got them to run on like a force plate or a treadmill where they like monitored it and like looked at their ground contact time and everything like that, and just seeing like after doing a strength session, their ground contact time decreased by X amount. Then you could actually say potentially before doing a race, you might actually perform better from doing a very small strength session because your ground contact time or like your biomechanical efficiency increased. It would be interesting to know that. And also to do a little bit of a questionnaire with them, like asking them, did you feel more fatigued when you run? Do you feel better? Like how does the effort feel easier or harder after a strength session? And actually got some feedback from them. That would be quite handy. Anyway, going on to the exercises, what did they actually, what's the details then of what they did when they were on the hip and core group? Like, what did they do to improve themselves?
I thought you'd never ask a question, Joe. Well, actually, do you know 2 of these exercises, Joe, are the 2 that I've given you to demo, which everyone listening, stay tuned because we have a awesome episode that is going to come up. Look, we haven't recorded it yet, but it will be coming because Joe's actually been a bit slack on these 2 exercises and he's in his off season. So Joe, the 2 that I gave you are in this program. So first of all of the exercises were either body weight or banded. And this is an important difference of this hip and core group intervention, that all of these exercises were prescribed at a load that should feel heavy. So the resistance bands, they were given 4 different resistance bands and they were asked to use the heaviest that they could do, and they had to do all the exercises to fatigue, but still with good technique. So when I always say to people, you got to go heavy, you got to load it up, I'm not only talking about barbell, I'm talking about the exercises with body weight and bands. You got to go heavy and induce fatigue to get substantial changes, which is what they did with these exercises. So I've got the list in front of me. So there were things like, they did front planks and side planks with a hip lift, static side planks, which are just phenomenal. Anyone that uses our app knows I always put side planks in there. If anyone ever comes to me and they want hip and core strengthening, side plank is like one of the best things you could do. They did Copenhagen adductor holds, pelvic lifts. So they're like hip bridges, pelvic lifts with a leg lift, mini banded squats. Anyone that has worked with us before knows that crab walks, like banded side walks, are ones that I give them out like candy, like they're going to be what I give out on Halloween, crab walks for everybody. So they were included. Hip flexor strength exercises, so like banded resisted hip flexions. They did lunges, but not just like split squats or lunges. They included jumping lunges. So they had some plyometrics in there as well, which we know are phenomenal for loading up through your muscles and tendons in particular. They did deadlifts with the resistance band, which was really cool to see. So they would have got their resistance band, made it really heavy and done some deadlifts. And Nordic hamstring curls, which are savage but are phenomenal. Joe, that's the one that I'm going to get you to do. Well, I don't know if you've done them yet. You can let me know.
I haven't done that yet. No, I haven't done that one yet. No.
You're in for a treat.
Get excited. And some side lunges. Oh, a bit of side lunge. That'd be nice. Side lunges. So they're challenging exercises. And I think this is why this study showed this substantial or this significant decrease in injury occurrence compared to your control group or your static stretching group, because these were actually seemed like challenging, properly loaded exercises, which you need. And it was cool too because the novice runners could obviously handle them. So they seemed like a real sweet spot of feasible to do because you could do them at home with body weight and band. In fact, almost all these exercises I'm reading off this list have all been things that are on the VALÄRE app and in the programs that we make, which made me very happy to see because I made all those before this was released. So I was like, oh, good. And yeah, so they're really good, challenging ones that are feasible to do at home, but they're still tough. So that's in comparison to, do you want to hear what the foot and ankle group did?
Of course.
I just want to say, Kate, you need to calm down. You're sounding like you know what you're talking about, saying that you had all these. And
if you can see me right now, I'm on my high horse. No kidding. I know, I get really excited. Okay, so nerdy. So they did, this was the foot and ankle group. Imagine doing these by yourself in the corner, alternating lifts of your big toe, separating.
No, wait, is that seriously what they had to do?
Yeah. Do you know though, these do have their place if you have had like foot injuries.
Well, I just imagine like a mini kettlebell that you put over your like big toe, like it's like 100 grams, like a 100 gram kettlebell that they like put over your big toe. That's what I've got the picture of in my head.
They come in like different size ranges. They come in like skippers.
I'll get one of them. Yeah, I'll get one of them for Arabella if there's one going, like a little mini kettlebell. Like we'll get her on it.
We could be on this. It could be our next business venture.
Yeah.
They did single leg balance, so balancing on foam, mini squats on the foam, ball toss on balance foam, ball toss on, or mini squat with a ball toss on balance foam. Foot inversion, so if you can imagine looking down at your foot right now, bring the sole of your foot inwards. Foot eversion, so both of those were progressed to include a band. Dorsiflexion, so pointing your toes up towards the ceiling. Plantar flexion, so pointing your toes down like a toe walk. Double leg and single leg heel raises. Isometric inversion and eversion, so that's the sole of your foot in and out, but just holding that for 5 to 10 seconds, which is not really long enough when it comes to doing isometric exercises. And then the static stretching group, well, maybe Joe could take us through what he does. No, kidding. The static stretching group did their calf stretches with a flex knee. So I imagine that would be like a knee to wall, like if you were standing against a wall, bending your knee, putting your calves on stretch. 2 to 3 sets of 20 to 30 seconds. Calf stretches with a straight knee. Hamstring stretches, quadricep stretches, hip flexor stretches, glute stretches, hip adductor, and some dynamic trunk rotations.
Perfect. Okay. We've got all the big players there in that one.
How do you do, Joe?
Joe, have those ticked the boxes for you? Are they some of your
for a run session, doing a few of them. They've got all the key ones there.
Oh, I love it. Well, the good news is, Joe, you've been doing that the whole time. It's not really made a difference. If we just sub those in, if you actually open the program that I've made you on the VALÄRE app and you do that instead, you'll be...
When I say I do these calf stretches, when I say I do these static stretches, I literally do like 2 or 3 minutes worth before I do a run. Like, not a run, a hard run, an interval run, just to warm up. Like, people that listen to this are going to think, God, does he do like static stretching for like half an hour every day?
Now he's trying to cut he's trying to cut his tracks.
But would it be like placebo or not? Because I do feel like it loosens me off a bit before I do like a run. Like, is that just in my head, or is it actually doing anything? Because I do feel better after doing a few minutes. What is it then, like, Kate? Like,
remember, Joe, when I delved deeper into this, you told me you also did some dynamic things as well. So
yeah, I do. Yeah.
If you remove those, okay, here's a task for you. We can maybe chat about it in the next episode.
I'm doing a run session after this, so I will not do static stretching and just do the dynamic ones today, and I'll let you know how it went.
Yes, and you're also going to do the body weight exercises that were in this program. I put them on the app for you in the personalized program section. It's on there for you, Joe. You're going to do those every second day this week, and then we're going to have a good chat about how you found them. We're going to tell our users how to do them because they're going to keep all of our triathletes and runners injury-free. But Joe's going to do the dummy, what's it called, a dummy run? A test run of it first for everybody. He's our guinea pig.
Yeah, I will give it a go and let you know.
Do you think we should make Nick do it too? I think we should make Nick.
Oh yeah, 100%, Nick. You're not getting out of it as well.
No problems.
The reason I'm leaving myself out is I already do them. So I'm going to be biased.
Yeah, I've got one question. So obviously we know that it's a study that was based around what was termed novice runners. Would you expect the findings of the study to apply to runners of all levels?
Oh, this is a really good question. Okay. I think if you were to use that exact program in high-level runners, you would not see the same results. The reason being is I think that they would be so highly adapted to have run for so long that some of those exercises would not induce enough of a physiological change in them. So what I think no, I don't think you would see the exact same results. So say if it was for you two, I would take that program and I would modify it a lot. So I would give you some of those exercises and then some heavier ones where, like, for example, for you two, you really would need more of a stimulus. So I would load up a little bit more plyometrics. Instead of just doing resistance banded deadlifts or split squats, I would do those with like a barbell and actually load them up with some weights. Then I would expect the same results, but not the exact same thing. I think they're perfect for novice, but you would find them a little bit too easy.
So you'd vary the exercises and the intensity of the exercises accordingly to the level of the athlete in an ideal world.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So on that note, I think that we can wrap today up, and hopefully everyone listening will know that now strength training can be a really helpful thing if you are a runner that tends to get injuries and you're looking for, the most long-term helpful thing that you can do to help minimize those injuries. Don't copy Joe and do static stretching. I think that bit of research is more in the favor of adding in some sensible strength training in there. And if you want to give these a try, like I said, they are all the exercises that are on our app. We've got injury-specific ones. Our general all-rounder programs do have pretty much these exact same exercises on there, especially the home program ones, because they are just body weight and band. So if you want to jump on board those, jump on the app. They're all on there. They will help you be a really resilient runner and triathlete.
Just before we go, I just want to give the app a little bit of a plug and just tell people that are listening that might not know a bit about it. £12 a month, you get 2-week free trial. And the great thing about the app is you can select a program. It will have loads of these exercises in and plenty of others that we haven't even mentioned. You can target swim-specific sessions, run-specific sessions, mixed triathlon one, mobility. There's literally everything, and they're all based off reps in reserve. And the great thing about the app is it will coach you as you go. It will change the weights depending on your feedback, which I don't think there's anything else out there, certainly not for triathletes anyway. So if you can't get a personal trainer, or maybe can't afford £40 a session for a personal trainer, this is as close as you can get to it. So give it a go. You've got 2-week free trial, so you're losing nothing. If you don't like it after 2 weeks, you can cancel it, but I'm sure you'll love it. And the fact that it coaches you is, I think, superb. And I sometimes use the sessions myself, as well as doing the sessions that Kate's actually sent me, because you can have an option, can't you, on there to get a proper personalised session from Kate, or you can do it. But sometimes I like to do the sessions on there myself, and I find it so accurate with how it changes the weights. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely that, like you said, it's kind of like having your PT. Or I tell people, I'm like, don't worry, I don't talk to you through the app, but it's like having me in your pocket, where if you were in the gym with me, I'd be adding weights or taking weights off based off your feedback. That's exactly what it does.
Being able to see how to do the exercises, I think, is amazing as well, because like you said, that hamstring curl one, I've never done that. I wouldn't know how to do that, but I could find it on the app and see Nick doing it, and then your feedback on there where it gives you the tips and it says a slight regression. So if this exercise is too hard, you can do this one instead. Or actually, I can do this one, but a slight progression on this exercise is this. And being able to see someone do it on like a 30-second clip and go to different angles, I think is amazing, because the main thing is you want to do it with good technique. We've all seen those people in the gym, haven't we, that like stack the weights and they do it with terrible technique, but instead of actually doing a weight that would be more appropriate and they'd be able to do it with good technique, they force themselves. And you don't want to be that guy in the gym, do you, who's not doing it in correct technique?
No, you don't.
There's always someone filming as well. You never know, you'll end up on YouTube or on someone's TikTok and Instagram.
I always have this fear someone's going to be in a VALÄRE shirt doing something real bad, and I'm like, no, I don't know.
That's why we don't sell the merch just yet. We want to make sure that people are doing it perfect.
So you know what it's going to be? Joe's going to be in his VALÄRE shirt doing his static stretching. Someone will film and be like, look, hey, Joe's still doing his static stretching. I'll go,
you're drawing more attention to it. People in Norwich are going to be out seeking
for Joe. Actually, a real quick one on the app too. If you have a specific injury, I have created injury programs on this. There's like Achilles tendinopathy, shoulder impingement, glute weakness, etc. There's also injury specific programs. So if you don't want a general one, if you're currently injured, there's options on there as well, and heaps of free info on our Instagram and our YouTube. So just jump on, watch, comment, ask. We love it. We're here to get you fast, strong, resilient. All good.
Awesome. All right. See you later, guys.